Okay, so it's 7 o'clock, which means that it is time for art demo night. So thank you for joining us tonight. The Rockland Arts Festival is pleased to welcome you. Please stay muted, which you are anyway, during the event. And you can write any comments into the chat. And if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. This is the third annual Arts Festival, and we have 130 participating and 9 free online and in-person events. Please visit the festival website at www.rocklandartsfestival.org to see the outstanding work and to learn more about the upcoming events. Before we get started, I would like to thank our wonderful sponsors, Arts Rock, Patso's Law, On Main Street Insurance, and Glitter Thicket Cafe. We couldn't have done it without you. Please check out their links on the festival website. And once again, if anyone has any questions for the artists, please hit the Q&A icon and post them there. And artists, please post your website and social media info in the chat. So let's get started. Oh, wait, I'm just turning the page. So first up, we have Eugene Lagana. He focuses on macro photography, but is always exploring new technologies. He thinks of himself as a student of photography. Eugene, take it away.
Thanks so much, Michael. Thanks for putting this together. So let me get started. There's a demand for beautiful artwork. Part of my intent when creating a photo is to sell a print. I'm going to demonstrate my process from taking the picture all the way through putting it on a metal print and placing it in the customer's hand. I'm going to review some of the tools that I use, beginning with the technique of focus stacking. Focus stacking is a critical component because my average print size is now 3 foot wide by 2 foot tall, printed on metal, and every pixel counts. Let me show you real quick. This is one of the metal prints, and they really have a lot of impact. I put a stamp on the back, numbering it, and a signature. So the next step in the process is blurb. This is a great tool for me. I was able to complete this coffee table book. I just got an order of 20 of them. And this shows all my pictures with technical information because I always get asked, what camera did you use? What lens did you use? And I'll show blurb when I share my screen in a couple of minutes. The great thing about this book is that it works as a catalog. When people come to my booth, they flip through the book and they order based on the book, based on images that they see in the book. So the next set of tools deals with setting up shows and managing the back end. I use an online service called Zapplication with a Z to apply to juried art shows. I also use Square, not just to process payments, but it manages all the available combinations of my prints with size and frame. And I'll show that. I'll log into Square and I'll show you how I set that up. I also use Excel, believe it or not. It helps with photography because I use it for metrics and creating order forms. I'll demonstrate all those tools in a minute, but let's get started from the beginning with focus stacking. So let me share my screen. And let me bring up the camera. And I set up a little scene here. So I'm going to show you why focus stacking is so important and why it's so important to me because of these high resolution, gigantic prints that I'm now doing. So here's a simple, typical scene that I set up. I'm going to switch the focus back and forth. Right now, the focus is on the back with the guys setting up the billboard saying that there's danger ahead. And here's people in a Volkswagen not really paying attention to what lies on the road ahead. So that's the storyline. Now, the important thing is if you look on the lower left corner, you'll see that my aperture is f8. So even with f8, you're not getting the whole scene in focus. And this is why you need to focus stack images. And I'll show you how to do it. The process is very easy. We're going to take these pictures, bring them into Photoshop, and it's only 2 steps. So let's take this first picture, but before that, I want to show real quick how close the foreground and background is, how close that Volkswagen is to the background. It's only about 3 inches away, and yet the background is very blurry. So you need to focus stack. And this applies to any other type of photography, even in landscape. If you want to get the foreground and the background in focus, you usually pick one and are happy with that. But with focus stacking, you could take 2 pictures and merge them together. It's an easy process, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate. So we're going to take this first picture of the Volkswagen. Then we're going to click on the background, and I'm controlling my focus point. And you could do it with an iPhone or any SLR that you have. It's important to know how to control that focus point. Now the focus point's in the back. I'm going to focus in and take the picture. And you can see the difference in focus. You could barely make out the Volkswagen in the front. So now let's bring these 2 photos into Photoshop, and I'll explain how to focus stack. Okay, here we go. Here are the 2 pictures. I'll drop them right in Photoshop. Okay, so here's the first picture, and it shows the Volkswagen in focus. But this wouldn't be by any means an acceptable picture, because look how blurry the background is, and even at f8. So what we're going to do is we have 2 images up. You could see them up here in the upper left. We're simply going to take one image, copy and paste it on top of the other, and then merge them together. So let's get started. I have a simple process. I hold down the command. I do Command A to select all, Command C to copy, Command W to close. Here's the second picture, and Command V to paste. So really, I'm just selecting, copying, pasting onto the other picture, but it's very easy with holding the Command key down and hitting those letters that correspond with those functions. Okay, so we have 2 layers here in this image. You can see them over on the bottom right here. The first one, layer 1, is selected. I'm going to hold down Shift and select the second layer. Okay, so now the 2 layers are selected, and it's just 2 steps from here. So all we did was copy and paste one picture on top of the other. So the 2 steps are this. We'll go up to Edit, and we'll auto align pictures. It defaults to auto. Say OK. And what this is doing is you could do this process even if you took the pictures handheld. So it auto-aligned the pictures. And if you were hand holding the pictures, they may be out of register a little bit. So auto-align lines them up so that they merge together correctly. Now the second step is go to Edit in Photoshop and go to Auto Blend Layers. And it defaults to stacked images, and that's where the term focus stacking comes from. So we're going to say OK. And it's going to blend these 2 pictures together, and Photoshop will pick what's in focus. Right now, the background is blurred and the foreground is in focus. And that's focus stacking. Now you could see that everything is in focus. And it's a great workflow to use to make sure that everything is tack sharp in your photo. So let's get rid of Photoshop. And now I'm going to demonstrate a couple of other things. I want to talk about how I'm getting involved in shows and what applications I use. I use a program called, it's an online service called Zapplication. Okay, and I'm going to log into this. It's free to sign up, but I'll show you what it gives you. Let's see if they'll log me in. Great, so I'm in. So it defaults to my dashboard. It shows all the shows that I've applied to, and luckily I've been accepted to all of them, which is great. And they're high-end shows too. You have some in West Palm Beach and Naples, and it's really a fantastic utility online to use to get involved with shows. So let me show you how I got started. I clicked on Apply to Shows, and then I filtered down for shows in my area. Or you could filter down for a time slot where you have availability to attend to these shows. And it's very easy to filter with this program called Zapplication Online. So you see how it works. There's shows in Massachusetts, in Texas, in Colorado, but you could, select the state you're in and look for shows. So that's how Zapplication works. Now let me demonstrate what I'm doing in Square. So I'm going to log into Square. Here's, we'll do sign in. And Square really offers so much functionality. It's so much more than just having somebody swipe their credit card at your booth. And I'm going to show the booth in a second too. So in Square, my dad and I helped enter all the information about all my available photos with the variants of frame size and type of frame. So let's click on this one, for instance. And it'll show, it gives a thumbnail and it shows all the possibilities you can offer somebody coming up to the booth in order for them to purchase. It shows different sizes and it shows different frames. We initialed them. You have a 24 by 36 frame mount, 24 by 36 edge mount, 24 by 36 tuxedo mount, and you could pick any one of those. And that's how Square really is so helpful. So let's take a look at my booth and I'll show you what it looks like. Here we are. So you could see the gigantic metal prints. Now that one in the background there is 32 inches by 48 inches. It's a little hard to see how big it is, but these are massive prints. And they really have a lot of impact, and this is a great way to bring your artwork to market. So I have another picture showing, this was at Las Olas in Fort Lauderdale, and a lot of people stop in and people point and ask about it and say, okay, I'll take it. And it's a wonderful thing. And it's very motivating to, sell your work. It'll encourage you so much to get back out in the studio, and create more images. Now, let me just show two more things about how Excel, you know what, let me jump to the book real quick because Blurb is fantastic. It's very easy to lay out the book. These are all the pages side by side, and you can see that I put in camera information, I title it, and you can go from page to page. And I did that throughout all the pages to the book. Now, I'm not a writer, but this book is a great coffee table book and very informative. So Blurb is a really great way to make a book. And again, I use it as a catalog, and it's just tremendous. So here's a inventory system that my dad and I constructed in Excel, and you could just put in a number and it will change up here, and you can get a quick view of in what category. We even put in a SKU for each picture, and you could see exactly what you have on hand, because as you prepare for a show, you want to make sure you have proper inventory. And another great tool we did in Excel was make this order form. And when I say we, I really mean my dad, because he put in a lot of work to this, and it really paid off. But this is an order form, and I use this in conjunction with the book. And people look through the book, and I may not have it hung on the wall, and they'll say, I want that picture in that size. And it's just a great tool. So let me stop sharing screen, and that's pretty much it. So thank you, Michael.
Okay, thank you very much.
I could take questions or whatever you.
Yeah, I don't see that anyone had a question. So I'm going to ask you a question. And
Sure.
That is, I think we discussed that you're self-taught.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I think that people that are self-taught, sometimes they make it look so easy. I've met other artists, and it seems like they come up with their art so quickly. Do you find that with these photos? Of course, you have to set everything up and set the little figures up. Do you find this comes easy and naturally to you?
Oh boy, I torture myself. I'll tell you how I start. I start with storyline, because I am self-taught, and I learned from people like Rick Salmon. He's out of Croton on the Hudson. He's written 36 books. He has apps. And one of the big words that he said, and I used one of them, was impact. But the other word is storyline. So you want your picture to have impact when you see it. Boom. And then people, they walk by the booth and they do a double take, and they come back and they and they love it and they fall in love with it and take it with them. So impact is big and storyline is big because people are flipping through thousands of images a day and you need to hold them, and you can hold them with storyline. You know, I've set up scenes and scrapped everything all together, you know, and it doesn't always work because it needs to, you know, fit in a couple of buckets that I set up. So it doesn't really come easy for me.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for sharing your information and your work. This was great.
Thank you.
Next up, we have June Van Dunk.
Hi, Michael.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm going to give you a little intro and then you can start.
Alrighty.
So June has been using resin since the early 70s. And at that time, it could only be bought at Rickles or the Handy store in Suffern. Her father introduced her to it when he made a tabletop full of pennies and then poured the resin over it. She's always loved how it gives any ordinary piece depth and makes it look beautiful. Your piece can go from trashy to classy with a nice, thick, bubbleless coat. That is what she's going to attempt this evening. So June, good luck and take it away.
Thank you, Michael. And I'd like to thank the Rockland Arts Festival for having me. And I'm here at Lisa D'Amico's beautiful studio. This is Jezebel back here. So first I want to tell you that I am using art resin. That is like the best stuff ever. You don't really need to use a mask with this stuff. You don't have to use one of those breathalyzer things. Respirator. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Ed McMahon. And that's like the only resin that you don't have to use. So I use an unprimed wooden canvas. But what I did do to eliminate as many air bubbles as I could, first I coated it with like a Krylon spray, like a matte finish spray, just anything. I've even used this fixative spray. So I spray a really good coat on the wooden canvas with that first before I pour the resin. So I measured I measured the resin and I mixed it for 2 minutes. It is very important to mix it for 2 minutes. If it says 2 minutes, mix it for 2 minutes. I prefer to use a fork, not a spoon, because on a spoon, the resin gets all caught in the spoon part of the spoon. But on a fork, it just glides right through, pops any bubbles. And now we are going to pour it. It's been a little over 2 minutes, which really doesn't matter because I'd rather pour it as it's starting to set up anyhow. I use this just in case those little air bubbles float in the air. So Lisa, you ready? And I just pour it on.
For it.
What was that? Some people do a little bit at a time. I pour it all on there. And I use my hand. I don't use a brush.
Oh my God, you're crazy.
And just because I'd rather feel it, you know? And you're popping air bubbles also as you're doing it. And you're going to spread this evenly all over the canvas.
Your bracelet's going in. It's okay.
I taped up the sides. Sometimes I don't tape up the sides, but today I really don't have time to babysit. Just spread it all over. I usually have music playing loud. It's never this quiet in my house. Okay. And then once you get every inch covered,
June, how long until the resin sets and hardens?
I don't know. I'm thinking like maybe maybe 20 minutes, it starts to harden
When is it fully hardened?
tomorrow.
Okay.
So I take that glove off because I'll put a new one on. And I don't want to touch my torch. This is the key to popping all those air bubbles. This torch is from the 70s. Used to be my father's. Now I use it.
Do they still make these torches?
They do. And you can find them in Blix. I always go to Blix and Paramus. You can find them in Blix in the same aisle that you find the art resin. They don't look like this, but they look kind of like it. They're like more updated. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna have to get way down and find the air bubbles. And you don't lay the flame on it because you can set a fire. When you see the air bubbles, you just pop them with this. Lisa, can you see this?
Yeah. I'm watching it on the other one.
And you can just see the air bubbles disperse. I love this. And if it starts to set up too quickly, the torch will make the resin soft and it'll make it flow again.
Really?
Yes, you don't have to worry about that. Like if you see it's uneven, like let's say it was going down this way, you just go like this and it'll flow to where it's heated.
June, can you only use the torch in the beginning of the process?
You can use it right on up until it starts to really set, because then the air bubbles won't pop. If you do have air bubbles after it's set up, you just fine sand it with like the finest sandpaper. I think it's like 0.01 or something. And you just sand it, lightly sand it, and then you pour some more resin over top of it. But that's not gonna happen because you're gonna get all your air bubbles out. Let's stay positive.
June, can you also use resin on a canvas painting?
Yeah, you can, but you have to build up the back of a canvas, a regular canvas, with a piece of wood to make it flat so the resin doesn't pull to the center of the canvas. So what you do is you just put a flat piece of plywood in the back of the canvas and some shims in there to make it level. Then you can pour the resin in. I think I got, I got them.
Get the upper corner. Do you have any other advice for everybody when
No,
using
but
resin?
you really have to keep babysitting this because you have to go around the edges. If you know, but I taped it, so it really doesn't matter. But you might want to just stick your glove on. Love it.
Michael, do you have any questions for June?
No, I said no.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I actually, there's one, what kind of torch? I think you kind of said it.
A butane torch.
Butane, okay.
Yeah.
Show them the
Like you buy the butane. I think I've had this can for about 15 years.
Oh my God.
And I use a lot. And you just stick it in here and you're good.
fill it out.
That's it. Fill it right up.
My question for you, June,
Yes.
it sounds like probably no, but have you ever had a situation where the resin just didn't work and were you able to sit, because these are one of a kind pieces, so were you able to save it or make it work?
Yes, what I did do, which I can see right here now, there is a piece of dog hair in here. And it's probably from my dog or Lisa's dog. Yeah. I did one piece and I just could not save it. So well, I thought I couldn't save it. So what I did was I took gold leaf, and first I took some Mod Podge and did a light coat of Mod Podge on it wherever I screwed it up. And I just put gold leaf down.
Oh,
And
okay.
everybody thinks that's the way it's supposed to look. You know, in art, there are no goof ups.
Yeah,
You know, that's what I tell the kids.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah. I ruined this one too with the charcoal, but I like the way it came out.
That's great.
So there are no air bubbles in this at all. This piece I did, and there are no air bubbles in this. So this is the kind of coating that
That's perfect. Yeah.
that's gonna get.
Yeah.
Can you see the, like the, almost like, it is a glass finish.
Yeah. Gorgeous.
And it's very durable. Love that art resin. Like, I love that stuff. That's it.
Well, thank you so much, June. That was great.
Thank you, Michael.
That was
Thank you,
great.
Lisa.
Okay, next up we have Lisa Fagan. Lisa first picked up a camera as a teenager and discovered the excitement of capturing a moment on film. Now she's combined a love of technology with the art of digital photography. Today she's going to offer some helpful tips for beginners. Lisa.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
So yes, as Michael said, I've been around cameras for a long time. My grandfather was an avid photographer, as is my mom, who had a dark room in our house while I was growing up. I bought my first 35 millimeter camera when I was 16 and used it well into my 20s, back in the old days when we used film. However, I did take a long break from it and then picked it back up about 2 years ago. But this time it's in a digital world, so I've had to relearn some things. So in a very real sense, I'm a beginner all over again. I started with my phone and evolved from there. So if you're just starting out or you're coming back to photography like I did, I'm going to share some tips and some resources that have helped me. I'm going to talk about equipment. I'm going to talk about techniques and share some resources. I have a bunch of links that I'll share in the chat when I'm done. And if you have any questions along the way, I'm sure Michael will share them. So first, let's talk about equipment. My first tip is work with what you have. Most of us walk around with one of these in our pockets, and the camera on your phone is better than most of the early digital cameras. So there's no need to run out and purchase the most expensive camera you can find. Work with the one you have. And if you have a phone in your pocket, that's a decent enough place to start. However, if you have a camera like this one, this is my baby, you have a little bit more flexibility for specialty lenses. Your camera likely came with something called a kit lens, which looks like this. This means that this is an 18 to 55 millimeter lens, which means that its focal length goes from medium wide to just about the telephoto range. So when you buy a camera and it comes with one of these, it's a great place to start until you figure out what kind of photos you really want to take. And if you're a beginner, don't let the numbers on the lenses rattle you. The numbers on the lenses they tell a story of length and speed and aperture. And I have a link at the end that talks about that way better than I ever could. So I love taking pictures of things really, really close. So the next lens that I got after the kit lens was this zoom that's on my camera right now. So this is an 18 to 400 millimeter. And while it's a little bit heavy, it also serves most of my needs. And so that if I want to go out and not bring a lot of gear with me, I just bring this. Another great lens to have is a prime lens. So this looks very much like the lens that came with the camera, but this lens doesn't zoom in and out. It's great for portraits, and it's also sometimes referred to as the Nifty 50. You can't make this stuff up. And I have a great link in the chat at the end for that as well. So 2 other things regarding equipment, a tripod and a light. So for me, a tripod is key because no matter how steady I think I am, the tiniest bit of camera shake can ruin a photo. So this tripod is about 30 years old, but it still serves my needs. Be sure to get one that's sturdy because the last thing you want is for the whole thing to tip over with your expensive camera mounted on it. I also use one of these, which is a tabletop tripod, which is great for macro photography. You know, perhaps like some of the things that you saw from Eugene. I love Eugene stuff, by the way. And don't underestimate the need for additional light. So we all spend a lot of time on Zoom, and many of us have ring lights. I have a ring light over here, so I'm not sitting in the dark. But this is a really great light from a company called LumeCube, and it's great. I can mount it on my camera, or I can use it as additional light if I need it for a shot. And it's rechargeable, so I love that. So all my talk about equipment, and I know what you're thinking, that I just told you to work with what you have. So that's true. But photography and like everything else, I'm a gadget girl. I love technology. I love gadgets. So all of this stuff comes with the territory. It's the cool accessories that help you enhance your photography. But by no means do you need all these things at once. Start with what you have, grow into your equipment, and otherwise it becomes overwhelming.
Lisa?
Did you have a question?
Yeah, no, could you just lower your, if you can, lower your camera a little bit, your computer, just so, because I guess someone had mentioned that they couldn't see everything you were holding up.
Oh, sure.
Okay, thanks.
Not a problem. Sure. Thank you for that. Can't always tell. Okay, cool. So the next tip I want to share is about where you buy your equipment. And I ask every photographer I meet, where do you buy your stuff? And I know plenty of photographers that buy everything online. But for me, holding the camera in my hands is it gives a different sense of whether it feels good in your hand, whether it's too heavy. I've picked up cameras and put them back down again because they were too heavy for me, or if you feel it's too light. So this is the point where I plug Bergen County Camera in Westwood, New Jersey. They've been around for 40 years. It's a family-owned business. You can feel good about supporting a family-owned business, and everyone in there is a walking encyclopedia of photography knowledge. To them, no question is silly, and every time I go in there, I learn something new. In fact, I've walked in there with something in mind that I wanted and walked out with something completely different, and not always the more expensive thing. They will talk you out of something they don't think you need, which is really great. They also do short-term rentals, so you can try before you buy, which is great given how expensive some camera equipment can be. Okay, so now I've covered equipment. How about some tips and tricks? So as a beginner, I really can't stress, I know this is going to sound very silly, but I can't stress enough the importance of learning how to hold your camera. But if you want clear and sharp photos, being steady is the first step, and photography is not a one-handed sport. Even if you're shooting with your phone. So you may be able to shoot, and take a selfie, and that's fine. But if you really want to get the shot, you need some steady and hard-held camera equipment. So it's elbows in. Maybe your mom told you to keep your elbows off the table. I'm going to tell you to keep your elbows in your sides, because even with your phone, if you shoot with your elbows in, you'll always get a clearer shot. And on a camera like this, I talked about this being a pretty heavy camera with this lens on it. It's elbows in with your left hand underneath to hold your camera. Because if you don't, I can guarantee you'll get some blurry photos. The other thing that I will share is that if I'm not carrying my tripod around, I'll look for something else to lean against, a building, a tree, a car, something sturdy, because this tripod can get pretty heavy to carry around. So unless somebody would like to be my roadie and start carrying around my camera equipment for me, that would be awesome, but I don't usually have that person, so I lean against a tree. So the next thing I want to talk about is angles and perspective. So don't be afraid to shoot the same subject from multiple angles. Like no photographer gets the shot right on the first try. And I know that Michael's a photographer and Eugene's a photographer, and I hope that they'll back me up on this, that it takes a few tries. My grandfather used to say you have to take 100 pictures to get one. And so don't be afraid to shoot the same subject from a bunch of different angles. And if you take every picture standing in the same position straight on, your pictures will be boring. The beauty of digital is the instant gratification of trying a photo from a different angle with different lighting and immediately seeing the difference it can make. So some examples might be, instead of just taking the picture of the flower straight on, take a picture of the back of the flower. Sit on the ground, and instead of taking a picture of the great architecture in front of you, sit on the ground and shoot up at the building. Get up close to your dog's nose while they're sleeping and take them from that angle instead of just while they're standing on the other side of the room. So just try and look for different ways. And the more you do this, the more you'll start to see the world as kind of your own personal photo shoot. So I want to show a couple of examples. So give me a minute here and I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen? So Michael knows that I'm gonna talk about this picture. So I call this one Blue Drop Mystery. And people ask me, well, what is it? And they look at it and they're like, what is this a picture of? What am I looking at? So the big mystery here, I'll give it away, is that this is a blue glass bead at the bottom of a wine glass, but the wine glass is on the floor and I'm shooting it from above. So, this is what I mean. If I just took a picture of the wine glass on the counter, it would be the wine glass on the counter. But this makes people kind of tilt their head and look at it and go, no, that's interesting. And they may like it or not like it, but at least it's interesting. So I like that. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is when we talked about tripods. So everyone who's from this area knows what this is a picture of. So I could never have gotten this shot without a tripod. So I took this with the zoom lens that we talked about before, on a tripod with a timer, because I couldn't take the chance of even the slightest touch to the camera. But without a tripod, you would never have been able to see like this truck going across the bridge. So, I just wanted to show this as an example of why a tripod is valuable and what kinds of things that you can shoot with it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There we go. Nope. No, sorry about that. Hang on one second. Bear with me, sorry. Okay. So my point is take chances, don't be afraid to try new things. And the more you shoot, the more you'll start to see the world as a series of interesting angles. So one question that somebody asked me the other day was, what if I don't know what to shoot? And my suggestion, of course, is take your camera everywhere with you. Start looking at the world differently. Pick a theme. Decide when you leave the house that, like, today I'm going to shoot everything that I see that's the color blue. And themes like this are great. And just like the discussion about angles, you start to look at the world a little bit differently. And if you really need ideas, I found this really great thing on Etsy. It's a deck of photo idea cards. And I'll put the link for that in the chat as well. So while I was watching Eugene's presentation, of course, I was learning all kinds of wonderful things. Photographers are notoriously generous and willing to share anything about how they got the shot. So even while Eugene was talking, and he was talking about his book, and all of the specs for every shot that he has in there are right there in the book. That is typical of photographers. So if a few things about, learning the craft is, first, learn what your camera can do. So if you're a book learner, get a book. But if you're like me and learn better from video, then YouTube is your friend. I have a few favorites on YouTube. One is called Photo Genius. He's a guy from Brisbane who he's a photography instructor, but he also does gear reviews, and he does lessons on different things like macro, or how to shoot fireworks, or how to take pictures of the moon, and they're all in about 10-minute videos. They're great. The other guy I follow is called Fro Knows Photo, and when you see this guy, you'll understand why it's called that. And then the last one is Photography Pro. I'll put all the links in the chat. But get to know other photographers. They will tell you how they got the shot. There are a bunch of Facebook groups for beginner photographers, but if you're local, I would also recommend joining the Rockland Photography Club. They have amazing workshops, photo evaluations, field trips, a mentor program. I'm really in awe of the talent and experience that that group has, and that they welcome all levels of photographers. But for me, the thing that I love most is that there's always something new to learn. And, the magic of capturing that moment in time never, ever gets old for me. So those are all my handy tips for today. I'm going to give it back to Michael.
Thank you very much. We did have two questions, which probably you kind of answered and you could put in the chat. And one was, where do we buy the light you mentioned, which I think they meant the ring light.
That's this one.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this light is from a company called Loom Cube, and I'll put the link in the chat. But you can also get it on Amazon. You can get it either place. But I learned. See, here's how it all ties together. I learned about Loom Cube from watching a video from Photo Genius, where he reviewed this, and this comes in like 3 different sizes, and this was the medium size. So that I got to see it in action, not just on the website. But yes, Loom Cube is the name of the company.
Okay, and the other one, which probably, I know you said about YouTube, someone had said, would you have a course that you might recommend for getting comfortable with digital photography? So if you have any ideas, you could put that in the chat.
Yeah. There's a few of them, and I'm actually signed up for one now. It's kind of like this 8-week course, and they give you assignments, and they run specials all the time. So yeah, there's I think it's called Digital Camera Mastery, and that's a great one to take.
Okay, and my quick question, which is, because I love bead photo.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about doing a series of beads?
Yes, I actually would love to do series of things. That one bead, I went to the dollar store and I bought a whole bunch of things, and the beads were one of them. And it was, I bought 2 bags of those beads, and took a bunch of different pictures in different configurations. And the one with the bead at the bottom of the glass was the one that survived all the incarnations. But yeah, so I would love to do that.
Cool. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
And last but not least, we have Jamie Jackson. Jamie is primarily a painter who draws much of his inspiration from New York's Lower Hudson Valley, where he lives. He enjoys blending different media and techniques to express himself and is always exploring new approaches. So Jamie, take it away.
Hey, thank you, Michael, and thanks to Arts Festival Rockland for inviting me along. And yes, as Michael was saying in the introduction there, I really enjoy exploring new techniques and trying to blend different kinds of media together. I'm traditionally a watercolorist and an acrylic painter. And a few years ago, I learned about this technique of bringing a more sculptural quality to paintings using a very common material. And I just want to step up and show an example of what I'm going to demonstrate tonight. This is a painting that I created. And it's a low relief, but there's a lot of texture in it, and it's finished with acrylic paints. So that's what I'm going to demonstrate and kind of explain what I really enjoy about this is that to create this texture, I'm using just simple all-purpose joint compound that you can just get at a hardware store. And I found, one, it's very inexpensive, and two, I think it's very versatile. I've been doing this for a number of years now, and I still just keep finding new ways to play with it, new ways to explore it. It's very fun. It brings out a real childlike quality in me because it's just such fun to play with. So what I start with is a cradled wooden panel as opposed to canvas. It gives a very rigid surface, and the joint compound naturally bonds very well to the wood. But I don't want to do anything. I don't have to do anything special to prepare it. It's just this raw surface. So, and the tools that I use, and that's part of what's bringing so much of the excitement and fun to this, is I constantly find new tools and new ways to apply and play with the joint compound. But simply, when I start, I will just take, like, I have spatulas, palette knives, regular cement tools, sculpting tools, spoons, forks, knives, old paintbrushes, really anything to bring it in. So what I'll do is I'll just really glop this stuff on. Sometimes I have a preconceived idea of what I want to do, and sometimes I'm just going to let this material evolve a story. But once I get the material on, I just start to work it and spread it around. And it has the consistency of frosting. So it's very stiff and malleable, but it'll hold its shape. So I'll just start to play with this and start to move it around. And like I said, I'll try different tools and create textures and the shapes that I want. And they have quite a bit of time to work with this before it starts to set up and dry. So you can really just have fun and sculpt it and play with it and just keep adding to it. Another tool that I'll use is natural sea sponges to apply organic textures and just kind of stamp into this. So really, there's just no limit to what you can do to manipulate this material and to add textures and really play with it. And like I said, you've got a lot of time that you can work it.
Jamie?
So, yes.
Sorry, can you maybe just move that closer to you? Because it's a little bit like, as far as on the table, half of
Yep.
it's about cut off on the camera.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
probably down a little bit towards you.
Oh, towards me.
Yeah. Okay, that's better.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
So yeah, you just really work with it. And like I said, sometimes I have a very, I'll draw out a composition, have a very specific plan. I've used this to create abstract pieces. I use it to create subjective things, typically landscapes. But really there's just so much you can do with this. And then when you're done and it dries, so it's depending on how thick it is, it's going to take anywhere from, half a day to 2 days to cure and dry. This is an example of one that I did earlier that is dried. don't know if you can see enough contrast with the lighting here, but this is completely dry. And I just put this on a flat panel for the demonstration tonight, but after you've given this a chance to dry, then what I do to then seal it is I will coat it with gesso. And that gives you a nice even surface to paint on, because the joint compound is very absorbent. It'll suck in paint. And I've used that to my advantage. Sometimes I do that deliberately and I'll paint right on it. It'll create a very matte finish. But typically I'll coat the whole piece with gesso and let that seal it, give me a very even surface to paint on, let that dry. And then I use acrylic paints. I'll use heavy body, but any kind of acrylic paints work just fine, more liquid. But what I do is I thin them way down, very watery, because this is where I start to bring in some of my watercolor techniques to starting to do the paint work on it. So what I'll do is I'll spray this, I'll mist the whole surface and get it damp. And then I begin I've pre-mixed a couple colors here just for this demonstration, where it's just watered down acrylic paint, just watered down with water. I'm not using any special mediums or anything, and just big mop brushes. And then I'll just drop the paint onto the surface. And because what I'm doing here, this particular piece is abstract, I don't have any particular subject in mind. It just looks very organic and very natural. So when I drop this paint into this wet surface, the paint just runs and follows the contours naturally. It settles and sinks into the recesses and starts to create some really beautiful shapes. It really enhances the texture, comes out. And I'll just go back and forth and I'll just kind of let the piece just kind of talk to me and tell me what does it want, where the colors are flowing. And this is when it's, I do find that each one of these, it's just kind of like a journey. Like I said, if I don't have something preconceived in mind when I start, as I go along, the story starts to just happen. It starts to talk and it becomes a dance of back and forth between me manipulating the material and the material telling me what it wants to do. So the one thing about this technique is it takes a lot of time because, like I said, the joint compound, because if you're laying it on really thick, it could take a day or two to really dry and cure. Then when I'm doing this very wet technique with the paint, there's actually it's just wet puddles. I wish I could lift it up and show you guys, but the paint is just puddled on here. Could take another 24 hours maybe to completely dry into the surface. But the patience really pays off, because once you get done, just the natural flow of the paint as the water evaporates and the pigment sinks and settles into the surface, it just looks so natural and organic and beautiful. So, and I've done things where even before, so if I back up a step, before I do even apply the paint, once we're back at that stage where it's dry, because this is a building material, it is meant to be sanded. You can carve it, you can scratch it. So I've also done it where I've created the texture when it was wet, let it dry, gone back and sanded areas down, added more joint compound, created more layers. I've done it with the painting after I've let a layer of paint dry. I've gone in and sanded some of it down. So you can just you can keep working in this in different levels. I think, again, that's what's drawn me to this technique and kept me interested for so long, is because there's always just new ways to play with this and new ways to approach it and create more depth, more interest, and create more compelling images. So I'm just going to step around and show you some examples. Again, I'll just go back to this original piece that I showed you. Not really heavy and very thick, but this is one that I didn't coat with gesso, and I went and put the paint right on top of it, and it has a very matte finish. It looks just like clay and very earthy. Another piece that I did, I used it's really one kind of consistent layer that I put the joint compound, and then as it started to dry and become a little bit stiffer, I took sculpting tools and went in and just created these patterns of nicks in it to create just this whole rhythmic pattern before I applied the paint to it. So a completely different approach to making marks on this and creating it. Then another example here is just, again, it's just another organic texture creating using just different tools and I applied the paint the same way I did just now, where I just dropped it in very wet and let it settle and sink in, and just to create this very like it's almost like a wood, very natural texture. So that's one of the things that I, because I, as a traditional watercolorist and painter, I really enjoy doing landscapes and natural scenes. And this technique is just because of the effects can look so organic and so spontaneous and natural that I've always just been really attracted to that. So I think that's about it. I mean, it's just a lot of fun. It's more the more you play with it, the more you learn about it. And it's just so easy to work with. Like I said, it's such a common material that you can just find, like I said, at Home Depot. As opposed to, I've worked with a lot of different heavy body mediums, and they're great too. But I just find this to be very versatile, very easy to play with. And yeah, so that's my demonstration.
Well, thank you very much. And there's one question. Can this be done on canvas, or does it need a stronger surface to hold, like the wood panel? I've done a lot of them on canvas. This one that I was just showing you, this is on canvas, but it's small. This is only a 12-inch canvas. It's the bigger the canvas, because the joint compound, it can become very heavy. And so, again, I've done some larger canvases with it, but one thing to be cautious of is that this would be prone to cracking because the canvas is flexible. So if it was to flex, you could get a crack. I actually have not had that happen to me on some of the larger ones that I've experimented with, but I do realize that it is a potential because it's not a flexible material. So my recommendation would be to use it on something stiffer. I've done them on just pieces of plywood, cradled boards like I was showing here, that are meant to be, worked up like that. So, but yeah, I think you could do it on canvas. I have done it on canvas. I would recommend it on a stiffer background. Okay. And I have a quick question, and that is, I saw that you were attracted to art at a very young age, and a lot of your inspiration comes from nature. So can you say that you were or are more inspired by nature rather than other artists?
Yes, because a lot of my subjects, like I was saying, I'm drawn towards landscapes. I also love depicting animals and wildlife too. So yes, more drawn into the natural world. Yes.
Okay. I see there's another question. All right, Aviva, I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but she's asking so it can stick to itself?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
I think what she was referring to when I was mentioning that you could work it when it's dry, you can apply more layers to it. Yes, it absolutely bonds to itself perfectly.
Yeah, because sometimes I was wondering if, sometimes with compounds, the thing you put on the top could fall off but you have to sand, like, let's say you coated it in gesso. Do you have to sand whatever area that you had gesso on if you want to add something?
Nope. I haven't found
just stick to the gesso?
Oh yeah, this stuff will stick.
That's cool.
It really sticks to, it sticks to the acrylic paint. Like I said, I've layered on top of areas that I've painted before. It sticks right to it. And I've had paintings around now for many years now that have not shown any signs of falling or cracking or failing or anything. So yeah, it's pretty, because it is it's a building material. So it's, sort of this industrial kind of thing. So, it bonds just fine.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to play with.
All right.
And it doesn't involve any solvents. You just clean it up with water.
Right.
It's not some, big heavy duty thing where you're dealing with any kind of, like I said, solvents or dangerous chemicals.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Well, I want to thank all of our very talented artists for spending the evening with us and sharing their art and what they do. Join us again at our free upcoming arts events online and in person happening now through February 7th. Please see more of the artists' incredible works and visit the events calendar on the festival website at www.rocklandartsfestival.org. and we look forward to seeing you very soon. Good night, everybody.